You are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 608 of this war. I am reporting on June the 5th. As always, let's start with the map so people can get we can get our bearings here. 82% of the Gaza Strip is now a no-go zone, free fire zone, essentially. Displaced populations are in the orange there, and the purple is Israeli military control. As we know, that term has, since the beginning of the war, been a term of art, not of science for the Israelis. They always say they control territory, and the evidence has been shown over and over again that that's not true, which is why you're seeing repeated operations in the same areas. Like we are seeing operations right now in Khan Younis, 1 year after the Israelis left Khan Younis, saying that they had defeated the Khan Younis brigade and that the war was over in Khan Younis. They're now returning, and they're doing the same in the north, as we will see coming up. This map is from the Office of the Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, and this map is the Israeli military map. They showed this map at their press briefing yesterday, that shows where each individual unit is operating. So you're looking at the south there in the blue, that's Rafah. This is the battle plan at this stage. They're calling the Rafah model, which is essentially ethnically cleanse and then completely destroy. That is the Rafah model. You talked about the aid distribution points. Those are in that area. The dotted line that you see there is the Morag corridor between Khan Younis and Rafah, which I have reported on. And one of the aid distribution sites is on that corridor. The other two are in the west in Tel Sultan, up towards the brown area of that map. The Hebrew is just describing which unit is there. In the south in Rafah, it's the Gaza division that's in charge. The 36th and 98th divisions are moving into Khan Younis from the south and from the east, and the 98th division was in Khan Younis last year, fighting in Khan Younis. It's also the division that ran around in late 2024. The unit that attacked Shifa Hospital. They carried out the third invasion of the Jabalia camp, committing crimes all through that area. Now, it looks like when you look at this map, like there's 5 divisions of the Israeli military fighting, but the key to what's going on at this point, 600 days into the war, is that these divisions are not fully stocked. They are not. They don't have the troop numbers that they had at the beginning of the war. The reservists are not reporting at the rate that they did at the beginning of the war. There's exhaustion in the military, and so these divisions are partial divisions. They're a collection of brigades. And normally there would be 5 in a division, 4 or 5 in a division, and right now there's barely 1 in most. There's a series of battalions in each one, but the force strength is a fraction of what it was earlier in the war. So when they talk about these things and show a map like this that shows 5 divisions moving, it's important to note that this is part of their public part of their psychological operations. But what's interesting about this map compared to the previous map is this map actually shows what territory the Israeli military holds. And it's, again, a fraction of that 80% that the maps previously showed. They've driven out the population from these areas, but they don't control them. And the areas that they do control are, as you can see in the blue there, surrounding Gaza. Those are the buffer zones. The bite into the middle of the map there is the Netzarim corridor, which they had already raised and flattened in the previous iterations of this war and previous battles. You can see in the north that that is the same case. They're pushing in on Beit Lahia in the northwest there, but they don't control Beit Lahia. And on the other side of the map, in the northeast, is Beit Hanun, and they have not operated in Beit Hanun, and this map clearly shows that. So I brought you this map just as an interesting it's somewhat honest from the Israeli military that they don't actually control these areas that they've been telling in the media that they do, and driving the populations out consistently over these past few weeks with their attacks on shelters and their maps pointing to that. So if we look at this next map, you can see again, so it's a big difference between what they mark as an area that's a no-go zone versus what they actually control. So the battle in Khan Younis has just begun, and Khan Younis and Khan Younis refugee camps are a big area to take, and there have significant resistance forces. There's 6 battalions in the Qassam brigades in Khan Younis. There's 4 in Rafah that have not been defeated. And so that is the situation that we are looking at. The Israeli straightforward this week when they were talking about this area to the east of Khan Younis, Gaza. According to Army Radio, the IDF confirmed that in the past 2 weeks, an operation to destroy the Gaza neighborhood in eastern Khan Younis has been completed. The 605th Battalion carried it out, and the commander told his troops in a letter to his subordinates that within a few days we managed to subdue the stronghold. Gaza no longer exists. So they are cleansing and destroying the areas that they are moving into. The goal, as I described last week, is openly now not fighting the Qassam brigades, not trying to kill militants per se. It is to take territory, to expand the buffer zone, and destroy everything inside that territory, which is what is the model of Rafah. And so just to set it up, the theme of this show is going to be tunnel operations. I'm going to show you how the tunnels have operated at this point, 600 days into the war. The IDF said last week that there was 900 plus kilometers of tunnels, and they even admit themselves that only 25% of that network has been impacted by Israeli military operations. But we know that that number is inflated because, according to the only people that have been in the tunnels, the Qassam brigades, 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐶𝐽, and the captives emerged from the tunnels when they were released and described the tunnels as a spider web. So when you see these videos of the Israeli military blowing up 600 meters of a tunnel, that's just an arm of a tunnel of the spider web. So that doesn't put the tunnel out of order, and that's why we see the resistance still able to carry out these operations even in the buffer zones after all this time. So the first tunnel operation that we're going to look at here is in Khan Younis. We're going to focus on Khan Younis at the beginning and move our way north. So operation slide number 5 is the multi-stage ambush that was described by Qassam as part of the Stones of David ambush. So we see here on the screen the route that the Israeli military took. You can see these 5 buildings here that are shown. 3 of them are rigged, and one of them has preset explosives in them. And you can see the commanders here using drone footage to predict the route that the Israeli military will take after the initial strike. We've seen this also throughout the war, these multi-stage operations where the resistance is predicting. So we see here a backup camera being used. The soldiers are entering to this building that Qassam calls it a wolf's howl, where we saw in previous operations where they'll fire out to bring the Israelis into that building. Here we see fighters working with a thermobaric warhead built by Qassam, and they're going to move in and ambush the reinforcements. And you can see the level of surveillance that the tunnel provides. And so once they get those soldiers in there, they detonate this tunnel, which they have done. And here they're showing airstrikes, Israeli airstrikes on the buildings that have been targeted, which is an effort to destroy the fighters that the Israelis presume are in those buildings, but they're not. They're underground, and that last shot was a soldier running away. So a detailed operation carried out in Khan Younis, and the tunnels are each part of it because the intelligence reconnaissance and surveillance before the operations. But as we can see on this next slide, which was the from the video, you can see here that the commanders using 𝐶a𝐐𝐞 drone footage or drones captured from the Israelis to get the overhead view. They predict the route. They know the route that the Israelis military will take into the battle space. But then they're predicting here, and this is the success of the operation, is predicting which buildings the Israelis will retreat to after the initial strike. And so they pick those 3 buildings side by side that they assume the Israeli military will flee into, based on intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance. And then they detonate those buildings where the Israeli soldiers move to, and that is the success of the operation. This next slide was also from the video, and you can just see their tunnel access gives them the ability to be within spitting distance of this Israeli military base and be tracking all of their movements in order to execute this operation in Khan Younis. And maybe Tamara can throw up on the ticker, my Twitter account, because these are censored videos. There's more to this video that we don't show because we follow we strictly follow the YouTube community guidelines to keep this show on the air, so you can check the full operations out. But this is the core of the operation that you're seeing, and the ability of the fighters to move into this area that the Israelis believe is cleansed of humans. And there's a zero tolerance for humans in this area. It's a free fire zone. So there's no intermingling with civilians who have remained in this area. That's not what's going on. All these accusations of human shields, everyone who knows this and has been following this show throughout the war knows they're ridiculous, because there's no civilians in the areas that these battles are taking place in. And 𝐶a𝐐𝐞, just by moving, becomes a target. If the Israeli military sees movement, they target that movement. A significant multi-staged ambush in Khan Younis carried out under the banner of David's Stones, which is what 𝐶a𝐶a𝐞 is calling this series of operations since the war resumed. And now if we look at number 8, you can see 𝐓𝐴 𝐤𝐿 in Khan Younis. Again, these fighters have been preparing a year for this battle because they don't move around Gaza. They stay in their territorial defense. You're looking at 𝐓𝐴 𝐤𝐿 here planting a pressure plate for their IED. They have a massive barrel bomb, which is filled up with unexploded Israeli bombs. They harvest those bombs, put them into a massive barrel, bury the barrel, and now here they're attaching the pressure plate to it. In this case, it's a D9 armored bulldozer by Caterpillar in Peoria, Illinois, that drives over and triggers the pressure plate. We're going to see it here from 2 different angles, but the setup of the pressure plate is such that only heavy vehicles will trigger it. No local vehicle will trigger it. It has to be an armored vehicle to press down hard enough on it, and you can see a direct hit on the D9 bulldozer. This is the second angle, the second camera of the same operations. You can see again around destroyed greenhouses, which is the area that the Israelis are working here in Khan Younis. You can see they are not inside Khan Younis right now. They're still out in the buffer zone. You can see the medevac here evacuating the soldier. And here in the upper left, you can see the D9 destroyed, being dragged home by a Namur troop carrier. So access and egress from this operation is from a tunnel as well. And I just wanted to point out a couple things that you might not have seen in the initial running of this video. The next slide will show you that 𝐓𝐴 𝐤𝐿 here is using a stake. You can see the iron stake in his hand here that he's using as a shovel. And if we look at the next slide, you can see he's literally blacksmithed an iron stake into a shovel. You know, the accusations that the fighters are stealing aid are so ridiculous that these fighters are building their own shovels so as to not use a shovel that could be used, say, by civil defense in rescuing, as I'm sure everybody that watches this show saw this week, rescuing babies from flattened buildings in areas that are not no-go zones. The massacres are happening in areas that are not no-go zones. The no-go zones are where the fighting takes place. The massacres against civilians take place outside of those areas. And I think everybody saw the horrific footage of the baby this week, along with Israel's hundreds of airstrikes that they carried out this week. Interestingly, they're not anymore saying how many airstrikes a day they're carrying out. They counted us each day. They told how many in their field reports, and we got reports up to 160, 150 each day, every day for a long stretch of time since March, getting them up to 3,500 airstrikes. This week, they've just said dozens and dozens. So they're starting to fudge their numbers. They're also fudging their wounded numbers, which we've seen throughout the war at times. But those are happening again, downplaying their casualties at this point, because the war is not popular in Israel, and calling up these reserves to send them into Gaza to die, to continue the genocide, is something that they want to keep information under wraps on that. So that is an operation in Khan Younis. You can see his homemade blacksmith. They're literally blacksmithing their own shovels. So I just wanted to point that one out. The next one is a mortar operation, and there was a significant number of these mortar operations. We could show a whole bunch of these, but the mortar teams are constantly at work, and this is a 𝐓𝐴 𝐄𝐿 operation, Islamic Jihad, but the Joint Operations Room participated in these operations all week. So we saw Saraya, we saw the Qassam brigades, but we also saw the PFLP Abu Ali Mustafa brigades carrying out artillery operations. We saw the Al-Amudi brigades from the Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades carrying out operations. The DFLP National Resistance Brigades carried out operations, and we've seen that all throughout the war. The joint operations function as essentially an auxiliary force, and they are in charge of standoff fire, artillery, mortars, rocket artillery, and they have been part of that in Khan Younis significantly this week. There was a number of mortar operations that measured in the dozens this week in Khan Younis, because the Israeli military is not inside Khan Younis yet. They're being targeted on the outskirts, and the Israeli military is moving slowly, and Netanyahu even admitted that this week. They're moving slower than at any point during the war because they're casualty averse right now. And so they are carrying out massacres, but their soldiers aren't too interested in face-to-face fighting with the resistance, who are waiting in their positions for the battle. So we will see coming up, I think, in the weeks ahead, we will see a number of resistance operations videos. Just this week alone, there was 20 operations in Khan Younis, a number of Yassin strikes versus tanks, Yassin strikes versus troops, IEDs versus excavators and tanks, all of the things that we have come to know from the resistance. So that is in the south. This battle is in the south. We'll move now to the north. We'll take a look at map number 12. Yeah, same thing, overlapping no-go zones that don't match that IDF map about area that they control. This is not area they control. This is area that they are ethnically cleansing on the edge of, and they use that word. They use the word cleanse, and Rafah is the model of cleansing. So we know what that looks like. In the north, these operations have been focused northwest in Beit Lahia, and also in the Jabalia camp. For the fourth invasion of the Jabalia camp is just beginning. They're just inching in, and they have not touched Beit Hanun, who gave them a serious bloody nose at the end of just before the ceasefire, when the general's plan, as it was called, to cleanse all of North Gaza failed, because the resistance didn't even let the Israelis carry out that operation in Beit Hanun, which is a farming village, let alone all throughout Jabalia camp, and Gaza City, where the most fighters, the most battalions are. So this is the map. We're going to look at 𝐄𝐥𝐤𝐈 operations here. Number 13 is the evac notice. Again, so they clear all this area. They call it a no-go zone. They push everyone into these smaller and smaller areas, and then the resistance moves into the red areas, and that is where the battle takes place. So the warning here that you're looking at is for the east. It is for Jabalia and Gaza City neighborhoods of 𝐄𝐥𝐤𝐈, Tufar and Duraj and Zaytun, which are east of Gaza City. Again, we haven't seen troops pushing into those areas yet. They're moving very slowly. But we saw a sniper operation in 𝐄𝐥𝐤𝐈, number 14. Again, the snipers access via tunnel, both access and egress for this Al Ghul sniper operation. That is also part of the Stones of David series of ambushes. We have to edit this. We have edited out the soldiers here. And of course, we're going to edit out the soldiers dropping, which they do. And the Israelis admitted a seriously wounded soldier in this operation, in this David Stones operation. We can see after this also that the excavator that was in the way saw what happened here and hightails it out of the area, which is something we see the soldiers doing. But it's interesting to see the because the Al Ghul is an anti-material rifle. It would make an absolute mess of that excavator. So it's probably the right idea by the military, but fleeing these sniper operations are something that we've watched all throughout this war. So another operation in 𝐄𝐥𝐤𝐈 next is number 15. There was 2 television IEDs set up against this this force working. Again, we see CCTV camera footage all over these areas. The Israeli military is very quick to say that there's cameras everywhere and tunnels everywhere, which they are doing. The television IED is one of the 3 core explosive devices that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 builds. We know the Shawad, the EFP, is used against tanks. You can see soldiers that we have blurred out again in there to meet YouTube guidelines. And 𝐓𝐡𝐞 also makes the Radia, which is an area explosive. And of course, hand grenades. That was the first thing that the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades built, was their own hand grenades. So they're accessing this via tunnel, and then they're watching from a third place on the screens, which keeps their you can see the soldiers blurred out there to meet YouTube guidelines. And the next slide is a real detailed operation that we're going to take a little bit to. So these are M15 American anti-tank mines that have been given to the Israelis in large numbers. We can see an operation here that is going to target an Israeli force that's stationed in this house. And this is beforehand. This is the tunnel. Soraya is showing us the tunnel. They don't often do this, but they're showing us the way that they accessed this building. And you can see the way the tunnels are used. They're buried below the ground. You don't just, they're buried. The tunnels are buried. You have to dig them out. And here they're rigging up with IEDs this house, where you can see somebody has just fled this house. And the Israeli military is using this place as a base. And so the resistance targets it, again, predicting which houses along the route. Here's, again, section that's been edited out with the soldiers, and I've blurred these soldiers. But this is the detonation of that operation. And again, it's from below ground where the fighters are safe, detonating the building. This is in 𝐄𝐥𝐤𝐈 again. Soraya said that they had confirmed casualties and that they had watched the medevac on this operation in 𝐄𝐥𝐤𝐈. This operation took place last week. Every video that I'm showing you this week is the same as ever. All the videos were published in the week since you last saw me. And so this operation falls within that. You can see the setup around the building. You can see the tank and the D9 bulldozer around, probably around back, like we saw in the previous video. There's more armored vehicles that just aren't in this camera shot. And I'm going to break down each of these segments for you because the detail in this is remarkable. If we look at number 17, so you can see the way the tunnel is built in this operation. They give us the shot of it. The tunnel is key to this because they're accessing the area in an ethnically cleansed zone. If they're out on the street, they are targeted instantly and killed, which is how you know that these videos that the Israelis are publishing of drone strikes on civilians walking in the middle of the road are civilian massacres. They say they're fighters, but they're not fighters. We've never seen fighters walking down the middle of the road. And here you see it in stark reality under this tunnel. The next slide, you can see the use of the this is a return to sender operation. They're using these M15 mines that the Americans gave to the Israelis and the Israelis used to blow up the houses. They were captured by Saraya and used in this operation. And the next part of it that we clipped here is they're hiding the IED inside the pot, because at this point in the war, the Israelis are very aware of the ways the houses are booby-trapped. They send cameras in, as we've seen. They send dogs in. So these are the disguising of this operation in a pot. The next one is the way it's used in the wall, tucking it into the wall here of someone's house. In behind, they showed in the video how it was on both sides of the wall. They'll cover that up. And the real interesting note is this next one here, where the wiring, he's even put the wiring to match the house's wiring so as to not be seen by the Israelis or the dogs or the cameras on the dogs and cameras on the drones in this operation. So significant ambush in 𝐄𝐥𝐿. There was a number of other operations in 𝐄𝐥𝐿 this week. On Tuesday, the Israeli military reported an incident where a fighter emerged from a tunnel into an alley in 𝐄𝐥𝐿. The alleys of 𝐄𝐥𝐿 have vexed the Israelis for generations. The fighter shot two soldiers basically from point blank range and escaped back down through the alley, back down into the tunnel, and he survived, returned to his base safely. The incident, according to the IDF, occurred in an area where the IDF had been operating for a relatively long time. Therefore, they believed that there was nobody in this area, but the tunnels allow them to access, the Qassam fighters to access the area that the Israelis believe they're safe in and hit them. At the time of this operation, the Israelis said there was an Air Force combat helicopter. So this unit has Apache helicopter support and still couldn't find the resistance fighter who killed at least one soldier they're admitting to and wounded two others. There was also an operation that the Israeli military reported on that we haven't got a field report yet from Qassam, but we will certainly in the coming days, that the Army radio is reporting that Qassam used a drone-dropped explosive on a special forces unit that comprised of two Yahalom tunnel unit soldiers. These are the special forces that go down into the tunnels, and one Shin Bet officer were wounded in that. And also there was an operation in the Jabalia camp that carried out a multi-hour battle that was based around IEDs detonated along the road that the Israelis take. And three Gavadi Brigade soldiers were killed in that operation, and two were seriously wounded. According to the Army investigation according to the IDF investigation cited in Army radio, this particular scene along this road had an estimated 20 explosive devices spread out along the route, and the IDF estimates that these were activated from a tunnel, and they made a big deal of it this week in their communications, talking about how these houses all have tunnels and that is the major threat to their forces and why they are moving slowly. So that is the northern Gaza Strip report. I just wanted to quickly bring people up to date with Yemen because over the past 2 weeks, there has been 19 ballistic missile attacks on Israel and 6 drone attacks with the Yafa drone in the past 2 weeks, according to the Yemeni Armed Forces and Abdul Malik al-Houthi. And one of the statements from the missile attack by the Yemeni Armed Forces said the Yemeni Armed Forces are following the developments of the battle in Gaza and stand in reverence and respect for the sacrifices of its free and steadfast sons. They extend the military salute to the Al-Qassam brigades and Suraya al-Quds and to all the heroic mujahideen in all the factions who defend the nation when everyone else has abandoned them. May the eyes of the cowards never sleep. Free, dear, independent Yemen is with you, and we will not let you down, even when the whole world does. It is with you. Yemen is with you until the aggression against you stops and the siege is lifted. And another ballistic missile attack 2 days ago, the Yemeni armed forces pointed out that the missile strike prevented American military cargo planes from landing. They're landing at Navatim Air Base in the south and also presumably landing some parts at Ben Gurion Airport. But we can see in this next slide the C-17 heavy lift that was on its way to Gaza just turned tail, I guess you call that, when you do a complete 180 and head back where you came from. Instead of dropping off military parts and components and weapons to Israel, it flew back to its base. I think in this case, the base was in Italy, Ramstein in Germany. And there was multiple of these, and I reported last week, and Nora reported as well, on the 800 airlifts of heavy weapons, heavy airlift planes bringing weapons to Israel. 90,000 tons, the Ministry of Defense bragged about. So that's one of these planes. So the air blockade is working in the sense that these planes are not landing. And you can see in this next slide from 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞, who put this one together, and you can see them all scrambling here in circles, not wanting to land at the air base that they're supposed to be landing in the south of Israel to unload these weapons. So a successful blockade by the Yemeni armed forces is part of their aerial blockade of Israel. And just as a last point, number 33, this is the Qassam brigades saluting the Yemenis for this. You can see the Jambia Yemeni dagger in through the tarmac of Ben Gurion Airport. You can see caution tape on this Qassam poster that says closed by order of Yemen, meaning the airport. You can see the control tower in the background. And this is from an Abu Obaida, the spokesperson for the Qassam brigades. He sent this message out in May. Glory to Yemen, the twin brother of Palestine. May God guide your aim, bless your struggle, and accept your sacrifices, Abu Obaida said. He said, you are from us and we are from you. So solidarity between Yemen and the resistance in Gaza that we have been tracking on the Resistance Report for many months now. And that is the Resistance Report for day 608 of this war.